what are some of the things that have really inspired you, or maybe you weren't expecting to learn, and
Yeah.
you've learned, and things of that regard?
Yeah. A good question. I think, it's kind of well known that Saint Joseph doesn't utter a single word in the Gospels, but he's still so, renowned by saints and today by lay people, and I think it's one because of his relationship with Christ, of course, and with Mary, and then also because what we can know about him and his character. He doesn't necessarily have to speak for us to understand things about Saint Joseph. In fact, the fact that he doesn't speak actually says something about his character, his willingness to trust in God, his obedience to God, his communication with God in the gospel is through dreams. And that is maybe a preferred way of communication with God, as we see in the Old Testament. But additionally, it tells us something about how Saint Joseph can literally discern the will of God with his eyes closed, if I can use that expression. But and he doesn't, an angel comes to him in a dream and tells him, you need to go to Egypt. And he doesn't ask why. He doesn't, push back. He takes his family and he goes to Egypt. And and then they're moving around, they're doing things that are no small tasks, because someone or an angel came to Joseph in a dream and told him to do it. And so he picked up his family and
Yeah.
he did it, which I think is a good juxtaposition versus maybe the self-indulgence or the idleness or the temptation to be timid that maybe a lot of men feel, where they feel a longing on their heart, and that could be something small. That could be something like, oh, I want to ask this girl out, but I'm nervous about it. There's a chance something could go wrong, so therefore I'm not going to take the risk. I'm not going to do it, even though they do feel a longing on their heart. It's a very different approach what St. Joseph takes. And then his silence, throughout the Gospels, also speaks about his focus, and it speaks to his discipline and kind of a removal of distractions, which many of us are trying to do in Lent right now in this period. So he can be
Mm-hmm.
a beacon of that discipline and that obedience to God. He doesn't need to make himself the main character to play a crucial role in all of our lives. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, those are some things I really admire about Saint Joseph. Some of the things when I look to him, when I ask for his intercession, it's often for obedience to God's will, because he's such a strong example of it in the Gospels.
Yeah. Yeah. I've found that sometimes explaining Saint Joseph to people outside of the Catholic Church can be a little difficult, because
Yeah.
maybe in more the traditional masculine sense, he doesn't really seem all that impressive, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And I've found it interesting to ask people, if they kind of know a little bit about prayer. It's like, what if I told you that like my relationship with God was so close that I prayed while I slept? Like, I think most people would be pretty impressed by that. Like,
Yeah.
even if you're not really in any religious kind of community, if that was a claim that someone made, I think you'd kind of notice and be like, oh, like, okay, that seems to be pretty intense.
Yeah.
Um, and that's the level of communion that Joseph has, like you mentioned. So I just think it's kind of funny when we almost take aspects of him away from just like the story that we've heard a million times, and actually like
Mm-hmm.
apply them to our own life, like you mentioned, like asking out the girl or doing the thing. Like, it's one thing to read, oh yeah, and then he picked up his family and went to Egypt, and it's another thing to be like, oh, I think God's asking me to do this right now, I
Yeah.
should do this right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's it's not easy, but it's not meant to be easy. I'm reminded of one of my favorite quotes from Pope Benedict. The world offers you comfort, but you are not made for comfort. You are made for greatness. And you don't think about Saint Joseph necessarily as some great man. The Litany of Saints has kings and warriors and all these people that are really accomplished. But Saint Joseph is put high on a pedestal because he is a great man, maybe not in a worldly way, but in his relationship with God and his obedience to God's will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and even with that, one of the things so I'm doing the consecration to Saint Joseph. We're going to consecrate ourselves on his feast day, so on March 19th. And we had a meeting last week, and one of the guys kind of brought up the fact that he really was thinking into the fact that Joseph is in the line of David. Like you mentioned, kind of the kings and all that stuff in the Litany of Saints. Like,
yeah,
we talk about Jesus being like the king who was promised, and of course he is the ultimate king that was promised. But Joseph should be king, like in his lifetime. Like that throne belongs to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I feel like that adds even like another layer of kind of his humility that, we can be assured that he went to Jerusalem at least for the major feasts of the year. He knew about Herod. He knew about this, what was kind of a usurper king, kind of in the place of the king of Judah. And he just kind of, went along his ways. Like, that's not where God is calling me to do. Which I think just adds, again, just, some of this more maybe like legendary aspect to Saint Joseph, of just, the exiled king who goes away from his homeland and kind of eventually comes back. And again, we know that it's ultimately fulfilled by his virginal son, but he does have a claim to that as well. Like, that is his right. And so I thought that was really cool, and I've been taking that to prayer just this past week, of his identity as king. And it almost makes him have a little bit more like gravitas, which probably I should have given him beforehand anyway. But it's been an interesting thing to think about. Thank you for watching The Making of Man. If you liked that episode, please click here for more, and remember to like and subscribe.